Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. Bradley's mother, Narcisse Golan, passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian Social Services. If he is ruled to go back, he will then face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known, and we have Judge Ann Donnelly to thank for that. And please call Governor Hochul, New York State, 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. And if you could go visit the site, pleasedoyourjob.com. We need 2,500 more signatures to get a case reopened. That's pleasedoyourjob.com. I have a brand new guest on. I'm so happy to have Marissa Keira Maginnis on. She's founder of the hashtag MeToo Family Court movement, whose journey spans the domains of professional speaker management and clinical research. Venturing into the creative realm, hashtag MeToo Family Court is crafting a narrative around trauma. Marissa is weaving together a compelling book, screenplay, and comedy series to explore healing with both depth and humor. Beyond her creative endeavors, Marissa is passionately engaged in networking and collaboration for the hashtag MeToo Family Court movement, spearheading a movement aimed at safeguarding children from abuse, creating a future that's not just safer but also brighter for the generations to come. And I totally welcome you. I'm so honored to have you on, Marissa Keira Maginnis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to learn a lot from you today. You've done a lot of research and things.
Yes, I've devoted years of my life to ending domestic violence and child abuse.
Mm-hmm. And it's so rampant. It's so rampant that there's so many homicides as well. There was
Yeah, I believe it's like the number one for women.
Mhm. In fact, New York Post just put out today an ex-NYPD cop kills New York City DOE teacher, who was his wife and his two sons, in apparent Rockland County murder-suicide. That just came out today.
I mean, every day I'm speechless. Every day there's a new one, and it's getting incredibly worse, and this kind of work is extremely depressing. It
Mhm,
really is.
mhm. Well, I know it is, but I've learned so much. You and I had talked for, I think, close to 2 hours on the phone the other day.
Yeah.
And I have learned so much from you, and I've had Bill Corbett on, I've learned a lot from him, and so many guests. It may be depressing, but if we can learn and take something away from it and make something better, anything will help. That's why I'm having you on.
Yeah, I mean, well, so that's why I'm writing the book. I'm really trying to spread the awareness. First of all, we have to get through this thing called cognitive dissonance. And
Yes.
I didn't know what it was until I learned what it was. And basically all it is having two opposing views at the same time, which is discombobulating, you know?
Mhm.
So that's the first step, and it's unpleasant and uncomfortable to hear about these things, but we have to break through that cognitive dissonance. The answer is through the pain. And if anybody's ever endured domestic violence or suffering on any kind of end, you know that the only way out is through it. Gotta
Mhm.
get through it.
I know a lot of people have, a problem getting there, and people want a quicker way to get there and get healed.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any kind of fast track way of getting through this. I mean, the one thing that I did learn about post traumatic stress is that there is no cure.
Mhm.
So if you suffered from child abuse, it is going to be, it's going to show up often. You're going to get triggered.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just, these are little lessons and you have to breathe through it. You got to get through it.
Mhm. And the big problem, as you and I had talked about, is this family court crisis. It's a global epidemic of personality disorders running these courtrooms.
I mean, I'm not even sure if epidemic is the correct terminology. I've often referred to this as an endemic because it specifically targets women. And when you're looking at the definition of the word endemic, it means that one group is targeted. So that's what kind of led me down the idea that what we're actually talking about here is domestic terrorism.
Mhm. Oh, I agree with that. I agree with that. Um, I was domestically terrorized in a courtroom for years. And then I thought I'd entertain a federal case, and I was terrorized there. Well, not in there. We never made it in there. Um, but anyway, you know, I've also had this dad on, Jim Shock, and he has been domestically terrorized as well. Um, and I think what I've noticed is that there has been a pendulum that has swung back. And, these courts have terrorized men for years, and now it's swung back. I would say in the last 8 years, I don't know what you think, but now they're going after mothers and they're still going after fathers. I mean, Jim Shock should have had his kid back yesterday. His girlfriend is living with an 8-count felon, and the judge thinks that's okay. These judges aren't looking at exhibits or evidence.
I mean, there's definitely questionable choices, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, through the 80s, I do believe that the um I do believe that the men were targeted.
Mhm,
It like beginning in like the 70s and the 80s. Um and they weren't predominantly the men. We know that predominantly men are the abusers.
mhm,
Not always, but more often than not. So of course nobody is going to think that it's wrong to take a child away from an abuser,
mhm,
right? And I don't know, I just believe that, that the 14th Amendment here has been really slowly over time undermined
mhm,
like a frog in boiling water. And then they went after the sex workers, right?
mhm,
So I mean, I'm not saying whether I agree with sex work or not. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that prostitutes, sex workers are often targeted already by sociopaths. We know that.
mhm,
All you have to do is go look at who serial killers target more often than not.
mhm,
And they go after people who don't have family.
mhm,
Uh, you can figure that out from looking at research. They go after the ones that we're not going to have a whole lot of sympathy or empathy towards.
mhm.
So
Definitely. I agree with
vulnerable. Yeah.
yes, vulnerable. That's what I was reading some type of study where these sociopaths, psychopaths, they'll walk through a mall and they'll look for someone who looks downtrodden and looks vulnerable to them.
Right. So there's also, I mean, we know about grooming,
Mhm,
right? And the way that these types of people think, they create lists on you. I mean, I know that one of my abusers created a handwritten list on ways to manipulate me. And I've heard about sociopaths, ones that have actually like tried to commit murder on their spouses or former spouses. They write lists, right? And we also see this with school shootings. We
Mhm.
have manifestos by incels, right? They create lists.
Mhm.
So they are very organized and they have a way of thinking, and um, it's very deliberate.
Mhm. Yeah, and, sociopathy, I've read that sociopaths are born, psychopaths are made. And from what I've seen, even in court watching, they've made quite a few of them.
Well, I mean, I think that, I mean, is that, I don't know if that's like 100%. I do know that there is a physiological difference
Mhm.
with a average brain compared to that of a serial killer brain.
Mhm.
They have shrunken amygdalas. The amygdala is the portion of the brain that's responsible for memories and emotion. And serial killers typically have narcissistic personality disorder, right?
Mhm.
So they have shrunken um, ability to empathize. And I do believe that is caused by a traumatic event. I don't know if it's necessarily, maybe we're talking about which came first, right? The chicken or the egg on this one.
Mhm.
Um, but I do believe that some sort of trauma. There are two different types of sociopaths, though. So maybe there's like a neonatal trauma that occurred that created that damage to that part of the brain. And I don't even know if there's any other parts of the brain that are anomalies compared to that of an average brain and that of a sociopath. But I definitely know that the amygdala is affected, and it would lead me to believe that that's considered brain damage.
Mhm.
So we've got people walking around with a disorder that is associated with brain damage, that is associated with a lack of a consciousness, a conscience,
Right, right.
and empathy. So that's scary.
Definitely. I interviewed Judge Mary Bullock a couple weeks ago, and she said there 1 out of 30 individuals are sociopaths.
I heard 1 out of 20.
Mm. Well, I don't doubt that either.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Well, either way,
yeah.
yeah. Go stand on the corner and like your nearest city and count 30 people.
Mhm.
Or my favorite thing to do is I like to go to the airport and count people coming down on the escalator when I'm waiting for somebody to come off the plane.
Mhm.
I'll count 20 individuals and be like, which one was the sociopath?
Mm. Right. Yeah, it's very scary. I think I think if I was a young person, if I were 20 again, I just don't know if I would date or even get married. I knowing what I know now about this whole family court thing and how it's rigged and it's a playbook, and you and I were talking about that. I just don't
Right.
I hate to be dismal, but this is what happens when you go through it. You get a dark sense of humor, and then you tell everyone, you know, don't procreate because it's unbelievable what people can do to you when you have a loved child and it's ripped from you.
Well, I've spoken to several mothers that believe that they were targeted by the men in their lives that purposely maybe, got them pregnant on purpose.
Mhm.
Um, And, it in this day and age, we've got AI, right? We've got artificial intelligence, and you can create entire personalities, and you can ask AI how to, um, help you on your agenda. It's really, really scary.
Mhm. Yeah, that's shocking as well. So, what are your plans for this Me Too family court?
I'm so glad that you asked. So basically, my plans are I'm in the process of revamping my old business plan that I had to close due to family court corruption. Um, and so we're changing some things around because obviously we now know that that business plan, that module will not work
Mhm.
because I didn't put corruption in the algorithm. So now we're back to the drawing board, but we are no longer going to be a uh, Maslow's mirror. So now we are Me Too Family Court, and we're going to use the information that we had from, um, that we all gained. We have a new team. We are creating new departments. We have a comedy series coming up.
Mhm.
And that's being coached by Mark Christopher Lawrence. He's a celebrity actor, and comedian, and he has a movie out called Bringing Back Christmas, and he's helping coach that one. I'm writing a book so that way I can let people know about what all of this is.
Mhm.
This is the Kinsey Connection flowchart behind
Mm.
me. And
Mhm.
this is a public health crisis. So that's why I'm writing the book, because I am trying to alert the public the best way that I know how. So the person who told me to write the book was Donna Ferrato. And she's a photojournalist out of Tribeca. And she's a domestic violence advocate. She's amazing. And I found her because when I was a little girl, I saw her picture on Oprah.
Mhm.
And so her and I have been in contact over the years. And she's the one that told me that my findings with the Kinsey Connection flowchart, that the public has to know about this. This is very scary. I've already sent letters to the President of the United States, the governor, the attorney general, my mayor, I think the DOJ. I can't remember everybody who I've contacted, but I'm in a frenzy. This is
Mhm.
absolutely scary. Everything that you see behind me here. The
Mhm.
little red dot over here,
Mhm.
that's Dr. Fritz von Balusek. He was a Nazi. He was a pedophile. He molested over 900 children in his lifetime. He was a pediatrician.
Mhm.
And our own American Dr. Abraham Maslow and Dr. Alfred Kinsey and Dr. Richard Gardner are all connected to this agenda. And it's been going on for 73 years. Dr. Abraham Maslow helped Dr. Alfred Kinsey, and that's why I had to close my business. Well, one of the reasons. And then Dr. Kinsey, he was the father of the sexual rights revolution. So we are planning a revolution of our own. We're redoing it this time with just the women. Men can be supportive, but we don't need anybody like Dr. Alfred Kinsey to give us our sexual rights. We already have them.
Mhm.
They were born with them, and he was a weirdo. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like,
Oh, yeah. And that's an understatement.
yeah, I mean, we're talking about Nuremberg Code violations also, which and during a time of war, separating children from their protective parents
Hmm.
during a time of war is against the Geneva Convention.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, you have a
we're
lot.
all coming together and
Yeah.
we're taking action.
Well, you have a lot on your plate. Yeah,
We all do. We all
we
do.
all
So
do.
we're coming together, we're uniting. We're getting educated on the Kinsey Connection flowchart, which can be found on change.org. Um, now I haven't updated how many people have signed the petition. I think it's close to 400.
Hmm.
But my job right now is to educate the public on what's going on. So we are developing some really interesting technological advances in this area right now, which we should be releasing for a press release any day.
Hmm.
We're working on that. We have our paralegal department working on that. And then we are also launching a store, a thrift store for domestic violence victims and survivors and their families. We are launching a makeup line with Valkyrie Bell, and we are coming up with some lobbying lineups. We are also developing a strategy to include a spiritual aspect for our sisters out there who are looking for faith-based ways to exit domestic violence and have a women-based foundation. So to support them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There, everyone needs a lot of support when they're going through this because, I mean, I wanted to leave sooner. I'm sure everyone wants to leave sooner, but it's so hard because you have pressures from family or financial pressures. It's really maddening.
Well, or he'll manipulate you back into
Yes.
the relationship
Yep.
and love bomb you, and then you get into the whole cycle all over again. You get
Mhm.
the love bomb, you get the honeymoon,
Mm.
then you get the devaluation, and it just, it continues over and over again.
Mhm.
So uh yeah, so I mean, I don't know how many times I tried to leave. But when you come from a domestic violence background, it becomes incredibly more obvious to me that people, they have like these invisible ceilings
Mhm.
and chains. And I just want to let people know that be safe, but we can overcome, we can leave. There's hope, and we're going to smash the patriarchy on
Mm.
this one.
Um, yeah, it's really hard because even men are being hurt by the patriarchy still. I mean, everyone's getting hurt by this. And
Well, so that's where I talk about Dr. Alfred Kinsey.
mhm.
They went after the men.
Mm.
They undermined the men. So Dr. Alfred Kinsey, he wrote this book. He wrote two books. The first one was the behavior and the sexual behavior in the human male.
Uh-huh.
And it was all based on he said that it was the average American man, and it was all lies, it was fraud, and he made other men feel that what they were doing was inadequate. And people like Hugh Hefner read this book, and Hugh Hefner said, I want to become the Kinsey pamphleteer. And that's where Playboy magazine was born.
Mhm.
So, it creates this narrative for men, and it undermines them, and it created a very chaotic and I feel really bad for some of these men. They've been conditioned to watch pornography,
Mhm.
which damages the brain.
Mhm.
And then they don't understand why they're doing the things that they do. They don't understand why, they go bonkers because they're, not having sex, or they're not having sex enough, or,
Mhm.
the brain has been changed. It's been altered. And, depending on what other kind of brain damage you have going on, there are other conditioning, you're going to be all over the place. And then 5 years later, Dr. Kinsey came out with human behavior, sexual behavior in the human female.
Yeah.
And he said that this was your average American woman. And that was also a lie. Most of them were prostitutes. Um, and also the men, they were all prisoners and bona fide pedophiles. So this is what he reported was the average American in these two different books that were all based off of child abuse. And I'm talking about the children of Table 34. And that's all just disgusting. FBI.gov has a file on all this, and the DOJ knows, the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court knows. Um, they've actually put this on their blog. They're not even hiding it. So I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, and nobody really. I mean, I have like the occasional person who even knows what the Kinsey report was, but more often than not, nobody knows who Alfred Kinsey was
Mm.
and the profound effect that he had on family court child custody cases. He single-handedly went to every single senator in the United States and convinced them that it's our fault, that it's our reaction to the abuse. That is the problem, not the abuse. That's what he told the senators. The abuse, it's normal. That's not abuse. That's what he told them. It's not abuse. It's completely normal to go and have incestuous relationships, um, uh, playing with children sexually is completely normal. That's what he wanted people to believe. He said that every sex act should be legalized. He said the only sex act that should be made illegal are ones that we cannot perform.
Mm.
So this was the man that changed our child custody laws. And we have to go back to the drawing board, and we have to correct the record. Other than, if we don't do that, then we are living a lie that's all based on fraud and all of this right here. Totally disgusting stuff. We have a Satanist on here, Dr. Aleister Crowley. We've got Sigmund Freud
Mm.
at 12 o'clock. Rockefeller funded the Kinsey report. Dr. John Money, his fraudulent transgender ideology has a place at the Kinsey Institute. And then you've got the Sexual Information Education Council of the United States, who has a heavy hand at the United Nations. You've got Dr. Richard Gardner, who is connected here to, he's one of Kinsey's proteges. You've got the International Planned Parenthood Federation, who also has a heavy hand at the United Nations. And they recently put out on International Women's Day the 7 principles, which say the exact same verbiage as Dr. Kinsey, saying that children have sexual rights from birth. So we have a problem here. I
Mhm.
don't know if this is an endemic or an epidemic, but we've got a global emergency going on here.
Mhm.
I
That's
mean, and
Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that, like, I mean, people don't really realize that the implications of all of these people doing all of this, we're talking about total world domination.
Mhm. And it's the domination over families, and it sounds like Kinsey doesn't have respect for anybody. He doesn't have any respect for mothers, fathers, parents, children, no one.
Well, so Kinsey was a bug doctor, an entomologist, and he turned into a child abuse expert overnight.
Uh,
And apparently the his biographer, Dr. Judith Reisman, who worked at the DOJ, she found that he actually had like some really weird sexual proclivities. And she said that he ended up dying from mutilating his own genitals.
hmm,
So he had some really weird things going on. And he said that he did not like the American nuclear family
hmm,
and he wanted to destroy it. So he worked with Dr. Fritz von Balusek, that red dot,
mhm,
who was a Nazi. And at the time of Dr. Fritz von Balusek's arrest for the murder and assault of a 10-year-old girl, they found a letter from Kinsey saying to be careful, to avoid being caught, and asking for more um, details.
that is so sick. Um, so what do we do with all of this? And I know we're getting like, I don't want to keep you all afternoon because I'm gonna have you back on. We're gonna kind of do a series on this really dark, disgusting. Um, I can't even. I just don't have any words for this family court and how this has destroyed the nuclear family. It really has already. It's already destroyed it.
I think first things first, I ask that people do their own research. And I would start with Dr. Judith Reisman. She wrote a book called Kinsey Crimes and Consequences. And I would also go and check out the SCOTUS blog regarding Dr. Alfred Kinsey by Dr. Judith Reisman. She wrote an amicus brief. And I believe that SCOTUS is being very public about this because they don't want to be responsible. They're gonna say that they were immune. They're
Mm,
going to say that, hey, look, we put it on our blog back in 2017. It's been there. We haven't been hiding it, but I don't think that enough people do their research. Oftentimes, I'm also noticing that, um, we are possibly getting silenced here. I found out that there was a movement of mothers trying to cancel Kinsey out back in the 80s. And I never
mm-mm,
heard about this. So here we are again, trying to cancel this dude out. He
mm,
has an institute in Indiana. So they get funded by the American dollar. And so I think the first things first is to get more knowledgeable on this topic, on who Kinsey was, learn what MK Ultra was, which was a human, an American mind control project that people believe was a conspiracy, but it's not. Canada is suing the United States over it right now,
mm.
and the United States is claiming immunity. So get knowledgeable about this stuff because we've been funding some very scary things and we need to get educated on it and start making some very um quick decisions here because children are being abused.
Mhm,
And this is scary. This is domestic terrorism
mhm. Oh,
at its finest.
at its finest. I
Yeah.
completely you know, if anyone has any questions for you, how can you be reached?
So we have an Instagram at METOO Family Court. We're also on TikTok, METOO Family Court OG. We're on X as Maslow Mirror. We have an 800 number, 8777 Maslow. And when you call that, just leave a message. And we are, if you want to get on our contact list, we're at METOO Family Court, the number one at gmail.com.
Okay, I'll put that in the podcast notes. I'm gonna have you back on again. And, it's like, gee, we're ending the new year like this, but we have to end it this way so we can teach people and to
Yeah.
learn about this. Because also, we also talked about Margaret Sanger the other day as well.
Yes. Yes. Well, a lot of this, and I do talk about this on a podcast that I'm associated with as well, Awake Nation, awakenation.tv, and Trauma Triage on Awake Nation. Margaret Sanger, absolutely. All of these people are part of a eugenics. It's leading back to eugenics. And I'm finding a lot of people don't know what eugenics is either. It can often be referred to as pronatalism now, but it's Margaret Sanger used to say that people who were not white or people who were disabled or people who were quote unquote feeble minded, people who had post traumatic stress should be plucked out like a weed.
Mm.
And we're talking about forced sterilizations and the inability to create a family if you want to. I'm talking about 16-year-olds being forced into what they called a Mississippi appendectomy all the way up until the early 2000s. 2012, I believe, we had the very last anti-sterilization law on the books. But I mean, eugenics is alive and well still today, and the taxpayers are, in fact, funding it. So we're in some scary times. I don't think that people are really aware as they should be. But this has all been very much done under the cloak of conspiracies and medical research and scientific knowledge. And people need to understand what's been going on here for 73 years. This is a crisis.
Ugh, of the highest magnitude. I'm so glad you came on. Um, don't jump off, okay? Um, Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption. And please join us again here with Marissa Keira Maginnis. I don't know why I keep and for another exciting episode, she will be back. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, and please donate to buy me a coffee to keep the podcast going. And I thank you so very much, Marissa.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You'll be back.